The focus of today is going to be about really just solidifying our understanding of safe system assessments, the process that is in place to actually undertake an SSA, and also just clarify the difference between a safe system audit and a safe system assessment and a road safety audit. Two different frameworks. There's merit in both of them. One doesn't replace the other, and they still are both utilized. So you very well may have a project where a road safety audit is undertaken and a safe system assessment is undertaken. There's overlap there, but they're not a like for like. They've got different objectives and different focuses. So, as I did mention, there are different works depending on which part of the country you call home about the way that we actually implement and deliver SSAs. For Victoria and for South Australia, we've actually pretty much adopted the same thing, which is relying on a specific cost of a project, of an infrastructure project. If it's above a certain threshold, then that's when you conduct an SSA. So we're not really suggesting that, if you're changing over a stop sign or you're replacing an advanced warning sign for an intersection or something like that, it's got very, very low cost, and that is not something that would require a safe system assessment. And for those more complex projects where you do have large capital expenditure, those are the ones that we're really targeting for the safe system assessment. Other methodologies may be employed to kind of capture the safe system thinking and the safe system alignment in those lower order projects, but it's not explicitly a safe system assessment to complete that. Western Australia, you've got your own kind of way of dealing with this space. So I'm afraid I'm a little bit out of the loop as to what's going on that side of the country. It's not an area that we have too much involvement in, just because the way that it's framed over there is not as consistent as the other parts of Australia. NT generally using SSAs on major projects, and the way that they tend to be incorporated is as part of a contract specie. So going out to tender, the road controlling authority up north there, they would be putting within their contract that as part of the design scope, we require you to conduct a safe system assessment. And then if you're a consultant bidding for that type of work, you just need to ensure that you've got the resources, or you're subcontracting the resources to complete that assessment. But it's really taken from that level, and it's that contract where you'll see SSAs being implemented there. Queensland's, they've actually adopted a policy. So they've got a TMR road safety policy, and SSAs are required for all TMR infrastructure projects as part of that policy. It's also quite common within Queensland for specific LGAs to have adopted their own kind of framework as to when they will implement a safe system assessment. So just as an example there, the Gold Coast's road safety plan, they've got specific criteria when they would be going for an SSA or not. So it can get down to the LGA level in certain jurisdictions. New South Wales, just making my way around the country now. SSA is generally required at feasibility, functional design and detailed design of all transport for New South Wales infrastructure improvement projects, and that is part of their road safety action plan as well. So once again, capturing that at a strategic level and then filtering down into the project space. New Zealand, they do things differently altogether. They actually have a safe system audit, not a safe system assessment. The safe system audit is a combination of a road safety audit and a safe system assessment. It's very confusing when you have to, like this morning, I just did a presentation to New Zealand on safe system audits. So I'm going to be continually messing up that phrase. In Australia, we do safe system assessments, but across the ditch, they do things slightly differently. They've combined things. ACT generally follow what NSW are doing, just geographically it makes sense. Victoria I've already touched on, and Tassie, yeah, requiring projects kind of on a case-by-case basis to complete SSA. So we don't have a homogenous, you know, across Australia statewide approach to conduct the SSAs. It is relevant to specific areas of Australia, which is, I suppose, not that uncommon. You know, if you look at something like signage or line marking or any infrastructure detail, we've always got little quirks in every state and territory. We're not very good at just going for a uniform approach. We like to tweak things for our own environments, which is a little bit annoying if you work within all those different jurisdictions, because you need to be up to date with all of those peculiarities, but it's just part of the work that we are involved in. Alrighty, I'm going to spend a bit of time on this bar chart or graph that we've got here, because there's actually some good lessons that we can take from it. And this was some work completed by Blair Turner, for those familiar with Blair, a few years ago now. Basically, what's happened is he's reviewed 35 major infrastructure projects. So this is not just sign changes or installing a little curb outstand in a local street or something like that. These are large, significant projects, you know, converting signalized intersections and implementing like raised safety platforms or raised intersections, or transforming a signalized intersection into a roundabout, implementing interchanges and grade separating things. They're big multi-million-dollar projects that were assessed. So these are real projects that were assessed. These projects had obviously an existing state, right? And then there was a safe system assessment completed on there, on the design that was completed. Sorry. What we can see on the y-axis is FSI crashes, so fatal and serious injury crashes, and those are actually predicted. So it's a bit of a forecasting exercise, trying to make an estimate of, based on the specific state that you are looking at, in 20 years' time, how many fatal and serious injuries are we expecting? Now, if we look at the first bar, so the one on the very left, we can see that before any SSA or before any intervention, just focused on the existing conditions, we can see, you know, we've got a significant amount of serious and fatal injuries occurring. Okay? So that's purely based on the 35 projects or sites that were analyzed, based on those specific criteria, you know, number of traffic lanes, the speed involved at those locations, how many volumes, how many traffic vehicles you've got going through there per day, and what's expected for growth in the next 20 years. Plug that all into quite a sophisticated little algorithm to then spit out, well, if we were to keep things as is in the next 20 years, we'd expect to see around 344 deaths across those locations and nearly 8,000 seriously injured. So pretty startling numbers to see there. What the next bar graph is showing us is the original design. And what that actually references is, okay, we've got these 35 sites, and the Road Controlling Authority, or DTP in this instance, this is Victorian sites, they have generated some proposals to change the existing conditions. So those are design options, basically, and it's just one design option that's being reviewed. And we can see that generally from the existing case doing nothing to going to what is being proposed, we are seeing a reduction in FSI. We're seeing a reduction in the predicted amount of trauma occurring there. Another way you could interpret that is currently the tools and the frameworks that we have in place within the design realm, it's likely that the information and the outputs that they will produce would increase safety, would increase the safety performance. That's not a blanket statement. There's, of course, lots of transport projects that we do experience where safety is not the main driver and you are seeing a disbenefit towards safety. But in this instance, safety was a factor in these projects. And you're seeing that just based on what the design team is proposing, we're seeing that reduction in the trauma. So that's promising to hear that we're already, to some extent, got safe system thinking and principles within our industry, and we're able to take and utilize existing reference material to improve our current network. The next graph, however, represents what the design team is being recommended through an SSA. So the SSA team has completed their assessment. They've done a score for the existing conditions. They've done a score for the original design. They said, yep, this is how we view the level of risk for each of those case states. And we're also going to provide some recommendations. So, we think that the taper length of this turn lane is too short, and that's going to be an issue for lots of rear end crashes. We think the speed environment at this intersection is too fast. We know that we want to bring speeds to 50 kilometers per hour or below, so we suggest raising the intersection, just as an example. And what we can then see is a much more significant drop. The reason for that is because the Safe System Assessment team is focused on one outcome only, and that is the safe movement of all users within that area. So the SSA team is not constrained by things like budget. They're not constrained by things like political wills or political whims, depending how you say it. They're able to make recommendations that perhaps are not, the easiest to implement, but from their perspective, if it's going to improve safety, very much within their power and remit to be able to actually include that as a recommendation. So we're seeing a very significant drop there, where if we were to update the designs and implement those recommendations as part of the SSA, we are able to significantly reduce the FSIs in those areas that are being analyzed. The final bar that we're seeing there is this being shifted and we're going back up. So we're no longer seeing the decrease. The final bar is what has actually been adopted by the project. And it's kind of just reflecting that we do live in the real world, and we do need to be pragmatic. The SSA team are making decisions solely with one lens, which is the safety lens. That's their only consideration. The project team, however, has much more, gears to consider to make the machine work and to get the project off the ground. So they're thinking about environmental constraints. They're thinking about their budgets. They're thinking about, well, the SSA team has said I need to underground all of my utility poles, and I know that talking to our utility friends is an arduous process and also a very expensive process. And that's going to add 2 years to my timeline. So there's often very reasonable reasons for project teams to say, I cannot fulfill that recommendation, acknowledge that you've made that, but due to X, Y, and Z, I'm unable to do that. And that's the reason that we are seeing that FSI crash predicted increase again, because it's unlikely that a project team can implement every single recommendation that's been made as part of an SSA. And that's okay. Like you need to be willing on both sides of the conversation there to acknowledge that the SSA team are going through solely with the safety focus. The project team have other criteria that they need to fulfill as well. But importantly, so you don't get dismayed, is what we're actually seeing from the original design to what eventually gets adopted by the project. We're still seeing the reduction there. So that's good. So we have injected the safety benefit as part of this process. It's not just a tick box exercise. Have you done the SSA? Yep, I've done it. And then that's it. Put it in the drawer and forget about it. We are actually genuinely seeing that there's benefits in completing this. It helps the project team kind of investigate other solutions that perhaps they're not considered or they weren't aware of, or whatever the circumstance. So yeah, it's good to see that this whole process is not just done as a kind of a prerequisite. It's something that you have to do. We're seeing that there are actual tangible benefits for the predicted number of people that are going to be injured or killed on the transport network due to these projects. So just to recap, the Safe System Assessment benefits. It is really, really fantastic for storytelling. If you are involving stakeholders or community, they love to see numbers. They love to see graphs and things like that. And if you've got a nice big graph that says this is the existing conditions and it's just a really, really big, mean graph, and that's representative of the safety risk. And then this is your design proposal and it's much, much smaller and the safety risk is going down. It's incredibly good at actually aiding that engagement or helping to the community to understand that we're not just spending millions of dollars at this intersection because for fun, we're doing it because there is genuinely safer outcomes that can be achieved, and that's what we're trying to facilitate with this project. So excellent for that purpose. It's also incredibly valuable if you're tossing up in between design options, particularly if you've done things in-house for a while. You might be a bit too close to a project and a little bit unsure of, is it better to implement a staggered T at this rural location, or should I instead be going for a roundabout or raised platforms on approach, or whatever it is? If you've got multiple different design options available, Safe System Assessment is perfect to have an independent set of eyes to come and say, all right, this is your existing case, this is the score that I give it, and these are your design options. I'm going to analyze each of them and make a recommendation to say your design option with the roundabout is likely to have the best safety benefit. You're likely to have the safest outcome there for all road users based on this assessment. Not always as straightforward as that, but it's just such an excellent piece to, I guess, help clarify exactly what design option you should be progressing with to then detailed design. Marissa.
When should LGAs be undertaking SSAs?
It's a good question. So it is depending on which jurisdiction you are in. Generally, I'd be recommending for larger projects, so things that are, millions of dollars and things like that. You could also undertake them for local area traffic management, a treatment or a scheme that you've got going on in a network there. You could conduct it there, but really the strong value in SSAs is early on, where you're a little bit uncertain about what type of treatments to implement or how the configuration could look. And it's probably less effective smashing the SSA out in those really, really minor works or things like that, because you don't get into that nitty-gritty detail with the SSA. So you might not get the outcome you would expect. So if I was LGA, I'd be, potentially just setting a policy within the LGA that any transport project that's over, whatever figure you want to nominate, regardless if it's on your network or if it's on the network of the state's arterial road network, you will investigate and organise an SSA.
Okay, thank you. We just had another question in the chat. Does not the older misfeasance or malfeasance come to play, particularly in Tasmania? The Highway Act gives council immunity.
I am not too sure what that is referring to, unfortunately. I can't speak to that one. I'm happy to take that one offline and follow that up with Ken.
No worries, I'll take that offline. Does the SSA team have to be independent like RSA?
Great question. Let's give a prize out there. Yes, it certainly should be. Like it's I don't think it's as explicit as with the RSA, and even within the RSA framework, there is a bit of a grey area as to what is independent. It's not, this is what independent means. So there's a bit of quirky interpretation there, I suppose you could call it. But yes, best practice would be keep it independent. I know working as a consultant, if we are doing designs and our design team are developing up, whatever projects, if we were to undertake an SSA, we would not do that internally. We would subcontract another consultant to review our designs, because even though I may not be in that design team, even though I may not be in that space at all and didn't contribute to those discussions, it would be very easy to see someone externally being like, you can't possibly review something within your own company when, the designer sits just there and you're good mates with him, and you don't want to create extra work from him or her. You don't want to create extra work for them because you're not going to write these really detailed findings or recommendations, because it's just going to make their life harder. So you want to avoid that at all extents, basically. And a good way that I like to view it is like, does it pass the pub test? Or if it was on the front page of the newspaper, would that shock people? Try and avoid those circumstances. So we would certainly absolutely subcontract, get someone else not affiliated with that company to actually conduct the SSA on our designs.
Okay, thanks, Max.
No worries. So the safe system assessments, it's all about aligning with safe system principles. That's generally the terminology that we use. You might have also heard me use like, it's likely to have a better safety outcome, or the safety performance will be improved. That's just more jargon for you, I guess. But generally what you'd say is, if you've got the existing conditions and the score's up here, and then you've got a lower score for the design option, you could say the lower score indicates that it aligns better with safe system principles. That's just a way you can phrase it. As I mentioned, really, really handy to compare the design options. It's a real opportunity for the project team to just inject their own skills and make those recommendations. A sound basis for the future planning and design of road infrastructure. Isn't that a nice statement? We'll chat about the process now, just so everyone's familiar with exactly how we get from A to B within the SSA space. And if we look at holistically the way that our transport projects are developed, this is very, very simplistic. But what we would have is we might have a concept design being produced or offered, or it could be a preliminary plan, functional, whatever. There's different titles for that. But that general, quite high level scope, I guess, that's where things tend to get started. And that is illustrated in this top half of the section. That is the best time to do the SSA. The reason that we're so emphatic about that point is just because you haven't necessarily committed yourself to saying, we are going to build a 4-lane new road, and it's going to look exactly like this. This is the cross section. These are all the details that have been agreed to, etc., etc. It's a little bit higher level than that. You might just be proposing to upgrade this section of road. Not 100% how it could look, but it could potentially look like this. There's much more scope for an SSA to be able to play with when they are being undertaken in that early design stage. Obviously, on the other hand, SSAs are much less effective once you're into the details. So once you're starting to do your longitudinal grades and doing all your drainage modeling and sightline checks and stuff like that, you're more or less committing to say, this is what is going to be installed. I can make little tweaks here and there to, the guardrail length and things like that. But holistically, this configuration and this cross-section is agreed and not going to change. The SSA is not incredibly effective in that area and not at all where we would be recommending to conduct the SSA. So to recap, SSAs, let's get them in early as part of our projects. While we're still in the concept phase, while we're still working out what this could potentially look like, it's not as useful later on in the design process. Conversely, road safety audits, they love the detail. They're really, really good at that. You get a road safety auditor that just loves flicking through 100 different pages and checking every single crossfall and things like that to make sure there's no obvious risks associated with that. And that's really where road safety audits are much better suited, because it thrives in that detail. It doesn't do so well in the concepts because it's very high level. It could look like this, it could look like that. Maybe here it goes to the left, or maybe it just goes straight. We're not 100% sure. It's not as effective in those early stages. That's really where the SSA has its most impact. So SSAs early on, RSAs once you get into the details. So the road safety audit is much more focused on that really nitty-gritty detail and information there. So just to clarify also, where the arrows are and the weight of the arrow, that's indicating just how much effect that specific item has there. We've produced this little table just to capture the differences between the road safety audit and the safe system audit. I really don't like reading to so much text. As you haven't noticed, I already go off script. So I'll do my best to run through this, but this is a really, really good resource. Just keep this handy, I suppose, print it out, put it on your desk if you are working in the space of trying to determine what kind of assessment to undertake. They both have their uses. SSA and RSA, they both identify the likelihood of crashes. The safe system assessments is much better at really clarifying the impact on the severity. You see that there is an asterisk there. It says sometimes. That has been improved with the updated AGRS Part 6. So the new way that we conduct our road safety audits, it is a bit more aligned with safe system principles there. But the RSA doesn't do as well as a job of highlighting the exposure risk. The way that exposure is actually calculated within an RSA is it actually just gets lumped in with the likelihood. So within the SSA, they're two separate things. It's exposure, likelihood, severity. Within the RSA, it's just likelihood and severity, and exposure fits into the likelihood. So SSA does a better job of bringing that out and considering it separately. Both of them provide recommendations. Both of them consider all road users. SSAs only focus on the majority focus is FSIs, fatal and serious injury. Whereas if you conduct a road safety audit, you might be looking at a car park and you might be like this, what the word is, like not the carriageway, but the path of travel in between the parking bays there. There's a term for that. If anyone knows in the chat, please put it in. That is too narrow, and there's going to be lots of, vehicles that are backing out and hitting another vehicle, or as they're trying to enter, they're going to have minor fender benders and things like that. That detail could get picked up in a road safety audit. The aisle width, thank you very much, Randall. In an SSA, it's unlikely that you'd make a big song and dance about that because it's unlikely to really have any effect on fatal or serious outcome. So there's that little difference there as well. SSAs are more broad in terms of the safe system pillars as well. You exclusively make reference to safer vehicles, safer people, maintenance implications, post-crash care. Making recommendations to redesign the project is required. SSA it's got a bit more power in doing that. Also looking at innovative design and more out-of-the-box thinking. It's less likely to have that involved in a RSA. The text here at the bottom is an interesting one. Because this SSA is a framework, and it is high level, it doesn't have the same detailed, as I said, as the RSA. It could also be used at a program level. And what I mean by that is, let's say you were working for the state government and you are proposing to, at 200 sites across your network, I'm going to, should have thought of this through beforehand. I'll do a level crossing removal. Say your state or territory has identified level rail crossing where vehicles and trains are at the same grade, and maybe there's boom gates there or flashing lights, but you want to rip them all up and make it grade separated. And SSA could actually be used to evaluate that program, because it could say, there's 200 sites that look like at-grade level rail crossings. If there's a collision with a train, it is going to be catastrophic. It's going to have very, very high scores there. If we're removing that, it's going to be a much safer outcome. So there's an opportunity to actually use SSA at a program level without actually knowing specific projects. Not as common, but just thought I'd give that one a shout out. All right, our SSA process. So just take you through the steps of conventionally how it's done. It never follows such a nice and neat flow chart that we're going to see here, but this is, I suppose, in the ideal world how things would work. So what we've got here is we've got an item in the text box, and then adjacent that next to it is who is responsible for that. So determining if we actually need to do an SSA and whether that should be a full or a rapid SSA. I'll speak to those terms later on today. That needs to be made by the client. So the client the road controlling authority, that's up to that side of the industry to make the call whether we should be doing it. The client then may go out to the industry. You might submit an RFQ or submit a brief. Maybe people within that space that could deliver it and just approach them directly. It's up to you to engage a suitable SSA team. Commencement meeting would take place between the client and the SSA team. The designer there has been separated just in case it's a really, really large project where you might have an end client that is different to the design team working on it. It's good to have all the stakeholders there just so everyone's on board with what's going on and what the project entails, providing that background information. We've done traffic modeling. This is how many vehicles we're expecting in the new conditions, or this is how many cyclists that we calculated on a specific time, things like that. Just collating all that information, really handy. Defining, understanding the project context. So this is all about setting a clear audit scope. So the assessment team isn't going to go beyond the extents of the project, beyond what the project team has capacity to influence. Although that may be of interest, it's very easy to just continually go to the next intersection, because you can see other issues there. But this is really just saying, no, this is the scope of the project. This is where we want that information for. The SSA team, get their boots on the ground, have a look what's going out there on site. It's likely a day and night inspection. Most of the ones I do are certainly. Google Street View is incredibly good, but it does nowhere near beat actually having that experience on site, just to see how traffic is actually interacting, and you just get a better appreciation of what's going on there and how it feels driving through there or walking through there or riding through there. It's really good to have that perspective. SSA team completes the Safe System Assessment Matrix. It's a large part of the report itself. Considering other elements of the safe system, or the other pillars, as you may refer to it as. Identify treatments, make your recommendations to improve safe system alignments. You've got to write up an SSA report. You can't just be doing a matrix and say, that's my scores, that's what I give it. You've got to do a formal report just so it looks the part and it's not just some random person's scribbles on a piece of paper. I think it's one important thing to remember. You can't just do the matrix. It needs to be quite a well-articulated document to demonstrate that you've really thought through the site's location and the specific characteristics of the project. Once you've written it, you are able to submit to the clients. The client then has a responsibility to respond to those recommendations. The client is by no means obliged just to uniformly accept all the recommendations. They can absolutely say, no, I cannot do a grade separation at this local street. That is a crazy solution, or that is never going to be achievable. You'd hope that your SSA team is not suggesting things that are just ridiculous. But the client does have the ultimate accountability for the project, and it is very important that they respond to the recommendations. The reason I say that is I've been involved in a few projects where, unfortunately, years later, it's involved coronial inquests and things like that. So people have been killed at the sites that we've completed safe system assessments or road safety audits. And as soon as something like that happens, the first thing is show me the paperwork, show me the designs, show me what kind of due diligence that you went through for the safety outcomes of this project. And let's just say hypothetically that a SAFE system assessment was completed on that project, and you get the report out, and you've got all these recommendations by the consultant, myself, and it's saying you should do this, this, and this, and this, because I'm really concerned about the risks here. If you're sitting on that as a client and you haven't responded to it, or you haven't documented exactly what you're going to do about that information, it's like a smoking gun that you've got there. Like a legal team would eat that up. So it's very, very important that you're not just getting these reports and then filing them away and saying, yep, my job here is done. I've done the SSA. It's crucial that you're actually responding to those recommendations and saying, yep, we can implement that change, or no, we cannot do that because that is going to take 5 years longer. It's going to involve lots and lots of environmental permits. That is going to really blow out the cost for this project, and we are unable to achieve that. Clarifying that and documenting that is very, very important. Conversely, of course, if you are able to make changes, don't just say in the document that you're going to do it. Make sure you communicate that with the design team, just so they can amend those, or they can make those revisions in their designs. Yeah, and that's generally how things get closed out. It's awesome as someone that does lots of SSAs to actually have that feedback, to see how the client has responded and how the designer has integrated those recommendations. It's not a requirement, so you don't actually need to keep the SSA team in the loop as to how you have progressed this. But just speaking anecdotally, I love it. I love seeing how the client is managing those kind of risks and what is feasible. It also helps the SSA team understand the other side of the coin a bit better, and can kind of give them a better appreciation of the constraints that the project team may be working on. So it's not a requirement for the client to share that feedback or how they've closed out specific recommendations, but it's very, very good, very handy to do that. The other thing I might mention while I'm on this process, and yeah, I suppose a regular question that comes up is inspecting the site and how that might look if you are working, in a greenfield operation. So let's just say you've been tasked with completing an SSA, and it's going to be a bypass of a town. So you're going to be building a brand new highway or motorway that's going to be running through paddocks. The site inspection, if you were taking it to the letter of the law, it may mean that you need to go for a bushwalk for 10 kilometers through some farmer's paddock. There's probably very limited benefit in you doing that, particularly if you're doing that at night. Instead, where I would certainly be focused on is the tie-in points. So where would that bypass start? Where does it connect with the existing road network, and where does it end on the other side? Where does it terminate? I would just focus on those areas and not worried about, just walking through the bush. In saying that, I know Ken loves to go for a bush bash. He'd probably, get the boots laced up and put the snake guards on and things like that, and go have a look, because he finds that exercise valuable. But generally, I think there's pretty good case within industry just to say, by all means, go out on site, but just have a look at where those tie-in points are, and don't worry about actually investing the greenfield aspect of it. For those of you who are interested in taking your accreditation within this course, and I suppose being recognized for that, there is on the VicRoads website, which is now called the Department of Transport and Planning, it's still got the old VicRoads domain name though. There's actually a list. Under the Safe System Engineering tab, you've got the Safe System Assessment guidelines and things like that. But what they've also got is they've got a list of recommended safe system assessors. You don't have to be based in Victoria to be on this list. One of the few jurisdictions that do this. So if you're interested in bolstering your CV, or I suppose being recognized by a jurisdiction that you have skills in this area, encourage you to get onto this list. Bit of a flow chart there of, you know, what's actually required. You need to have done this course. So that's a big tick. Congratulations, everyone here. You pass this and you get your certificate. You've completed that little hurdle of this race. But you also actually need to have gained first-hand experience of being an SSA, or being within an SSA team. So you probably have to reach out to others that are already on the list to see if you can, you know, join in on an SSA, and just mark yourself down when you sign off on the report that you are a safe system assessor in training, or something like that. Once you've got that kind of info, you send it off to the Safe System Engineering team. We've got their email address there. They actually review that information. So they look through the report just to check it's consistent with industry. And then they periodically just update a PDF document, which is a list of what they refer to as recommended safe system assessors. So there's my name right at the bottom. I'm glad I make the cut there. Yeah, so it's good if you do actually want to be recognized for this accreditation, and you've got a jurisdiction there that can back that up. If that sounded like too much work, then good news, South Australia, they're even more lax. You can just send South Australia, there's the contact there, Department of Infrastructure and Transport. If you send the contact an email saying, I've completed the course, Safe System Assessments, they'll put you on this list. So this is their list of pre-qualified safe system assessors. They don't need the report. They don't need to see evidence of you actually completing that aspect of it. They just need to see you've attended a training course here. So that one's the easier route. So something that you can keep in mind. Marissa, have any questions come through? I realize I've just been smashing things out. I haven't checked in.
No questions. No questions at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
I really hope that my microphone and shared screen is working and I'm not just talking to myself again.
No, it's absolutely working. And if anyone does have any questions, please pop them in the chat. I'll shoot them over to Max.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'll carry along and we'll pause for a break in 5 minutes or so. I am just going to quickly chat through the Victorian jurisdictional requirements. I appreciate not everyone here is from Victoria, but if you're working for an LGA and you don't currently have a position on this is probably a good starting point to determine when you would conduct SSAs. So in Victoria, if the total estimated cost or total estimated investment of a transport project is less than $2 million, it said a rapid SSA may be required where it has been determined that a formal assessment is required, but most of the time it's actually just encouraged as an optional thing. Instead, when it is not undertaken, document exactly how the project team has considered the safe system alignment. So you don't have to do the full-blown SSA when the project is less than 2 mil. Just have a little memo or something like that, how you've considered the crash forces, the likelihood and severity of different crash risks, and the alignment with safe system principles. When it's between 2 to 5 mil, you do a full SSA for complex projects, innovative stuff that hasn't been done before. Yeah, there's a little bit of play that can be done there. And a rapid SSA for projects with a low risk of FSI. You also might do, if you've got very significant project and it's going to go through multiple revisions, you might do a full SSA at the start, and then once it's been revised, complete a rapid SSA. And I'll speak to what those differences are on the next slide. It's much of a muchness, in my opinion. Anything over 5 million, though, just saying that, yeah, do the full SSA, and only do the rapid if it's already been done previously. So what is the difference between the full and the rapid? I'm actually of the opinion that this overcomplicates things, and there's not such a significant difference. There's a lot of overlap. The rapid SSA, I would say, is about 75% of a full SSA. So it's not like you're saving, tens of thousands of dollars by going for one or the other. It's much of a muchness, in my opinion, but I'll still go through what those differences are. So commencement meeting for a full SSA, it's generally just absolutely part of the process, but not necessarily required as part of an SSA. You've certainly got to go through all the background context. You've got to understand the existing road and things like that. You may conduct a workshop within the full SSA. The workshop would involve sitting down with stakeholders, chatting through the process, just making sure everyone understands the point of the SSA and also understands the responsibilities of the clients at the end of the day and how to respond to the SSA. This is probably the biggest one. Site inspections for full SSA. That's pretty standard. Rapid SSA might not involve a site inspection. So you may be okay just to have a look at a desktop review. Just look at the plans, look at Google Street View, and use that assessment. I'm personally not overly comfortable with that. I'm definitely the type of person to be going out on sites, even if the client is saying that it's not required. I just find I get a much better appreciation for risks if I'm actually got boots on ground and I'm able to attend the site. But certainly rapid SSAs, if it was an incredibly remote area and it's going to take, 2.5 days to get there, you could see the value in just conducting a desktop assessment there. The full SSA has consideration of all the safe system pillars. The rapid SSA does not. So it just focuses on the infrastructure, the road environment and the speeds, but not the other pillars. Both of them have got the recommendations. Both of them have got, that conversation with the project team about how things could potentially change and stuff like that. So as I said, there's not significant benefit going for one or the other. I just tend to encourage clients for the full because I think it's just a more rounded, final output that you'll get. I might pause there and I'll give everyone, Marissa, a 4-minute break. So you can go out and make yourself a cup of tea or a coffee or go get a drink, and we'll be back up and running in 4 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a nice break. We can continue with the discussion. So the last part of this session is just going to be going through some different safe system road environments. Just some different road environments with safe system thinking. Because the SSA can be applied in multiple road and roadside areas. It's not just, a motorway or arterial road. There's lots of different ways that you could apply the SSA framework and where you could potentially be undertaking an SSA. And so we just want to spend a bit of time going through what you may be looking out for within different environments. So I'm just going to speak through them. I mean, you're more than welcome to contribute your own points within those areas, but just really wanted to make everyone confident in what they may have to consider if they were auditing or assessing different areas. After we've gone through that, I'll get Marissa just to run through the completion of the course and how you actually achieve your certificate. And then hopefully we'll get to finish a little early and give you a chance to just get stuck into any of the outstanding coursework that you may have, or get stuck into lunch if it's that time of day for you. Anywho, let's have a chat. So these are some of the road environments or road scenarios that we've found are quite common to undertake SSAs. It's not an exhaustive list, but I'm just going to really chat through, yes, what I would look out for if I was conducting an SSA in that environment. So we get started. Residential area. So you could be planning changes within local streets. It's not uncommon to see local streets these days to have protected bicycle lanes, maybe moving parking, maybe removing parking, which is very, very challenging to do. But things like that is actually quite common to see an SSA conducted for. If this was a project that involved installing a protected bicycle lane, probably that you'll see improvements for the safety of bike riders. So within that aspect of the matrix, you may see improved scores for them. But you'd also need to be considering, if you are tightening up this cross section further, is there going to be enough space within that central shared lane to be able to safely overtake, or are you running the risk of having lots of vehicles, I suppose, getting frustrated that there's not enough overtaking opportunities and things like that? Things that you could perhaps recommend to support safer environments within these kind of residential and scenarios, and something that I think is often overlooked but is incredibly effective. Basically, trying to make it less permeable. All I mean by that is just don't make it easy just to use this as a rat run, particularly if it's near arterial corridors. You want to limit that interface, really, and focus arterial traffic staying on those arterial roads. So in instances like this, it's not uncommon to suggest things like, creating little cul-de-sacs and actually blocking off general traffic, so that you've got less exposure, because presumably you'd have less traffic volumes going through that area. And that would likely have much improved safety benefits for all of the crash types. If you've got less vehicles, you've got less head-ons, less intersection, less run-off road, less collisions with peds, cyclists, motorbikes. So it's generally quite an effective solution within local residential environments, and not something that we see a lot of, but it's something that is actually quite effective, and it is used internationally. So I suppose just be mindful of that. Shopping strips. It can be pretty challenging in these environments where you've got lots of competing demands and lots of pedestrian activity to make changes, just because of these environments tend to get political, and all the shop owners have a particular idea of what this environment look like, and all the pedestrians accessing the space have an idea of what this should look like for them, and also all the drivers, and there's buses along here as well. So there is a lot going on, and it is difficult to manage all of those modes. But things that automatically stand out to me in this type of scenario is the use of these types of bollards, it's quite hostile. Like it just doesn't really feel like this is a pedestrian space, which it actually is. And it also, like, combine that with this flush curbing that's being implemented. While that can certainly work to kind of extend the footpath and things like that, to me, this still feels very much like a carriageway. And I would be very hesitant as a pedestrian just to be crossing in all directions and things like that. So, well, what could we do to help, improve this type of scenario? Maybe we do actually limit access. So it's no longer just a free for all for buses and general traffic and things like that. Maybe one of those modes has got to give up some of that right to enter this space, and we try and bring down that exposure once again. So if we get less general traffic going through here, we're going to have a reduced exposure score. And across the board, we'll see reductions in the overall score for each of the crash risks identified. Other things that you might be doing, in instances like shopping strips, is streetscape improvements. So narrowing the carriageway, building out planter boxes or parklets, getting rid of parking to create little pockets for people to have on-street dining opportunities and things like that. Those types of things may impact on the likelihood of crashes. So you might have vehicles that are, slowing down a little bit more because they know that it's a different type of environment. And when you are having those speed reductions, it's likely that you're going to see the reduction in both the likelihood and the severity, once again bringing down the scores there. Mixed use arterials. So these are also a challenging environment because managing that movement flow is generally quite a high priority. But the adjacent land use might also be quite attractive for people to want to get to and want to spend time and things like that. What's really challenging within this space is, as we can see here, pedestrian desire lines. Generally, we have those situated at intersections because we've already signalized the intersection. So we've got, priority crossings for pedestrians at those locations. You may also have to investigate mid-block opportunities. So POSs, pedestrian operated signals, if it's possible to install there, but there's also a fine line of just putting too many traffic signals along a length of road and then having lots of driver frustration about having to stop every 50 meters or so for another red light. But what we can see here, we do have like a dedicated bus lane, which doesn't seem to be working as intended, as I can see vehicles parking there. And you've got all these traffic lanes. Like it's once again not a very inviting environment. Things that you could look to perhaps improve the safety for these types of scenarios is if there's any room for actually trying to get some kind of physical curbing to separate the two traffic streams. It does look incredibly narrow there, so I'm not sure how feasible that would be. But if this is, a mixed use arterial and that movement of traffic is very, very important. If there's other opportunities to look at creating protected facilities for those that are potentially riding through here. Doesn't look like there's any cycling facilities here, and maybe that's a deliberate choice. Instead, they're using an alternative route, a parallel route, to facilitate that journey, which could be a recommendation. So you could be recommending, I don't think this is an appropriate location to be promoting cycling. Instead, look at other routes to help facilitate their journeys. I think that's a valid recommendation to make. Probably what you could also be recommending in instances like this is, well, a high risk locations, or where I suppose the risk profile peaks, is likely at the intersections. So what can we do with those intersections to bring down that risk? And really, really strong argument here is just to create raised safety platforms or raised intersections so that vehicles traveling through the intersection are reducing their speeds. And therefore, if a collision does occur, it's going to be at lower speeds and hopefully survivable. So probably what you could be looking out for in those scenarios, but it is challenging. Low volume rural roads. It might look something like this in your jurisdiction. It might not look quite as good as this. Maybe you don't have any line marking. Maybe it's not sealed. But more often than not, the rural default will just automatically apply, which is 100 kilometers per hour. And if you were taking that as the operating speed, or the operating speed is likely higher than that, we know that that is much, much higher than what is survivable for any of the intersections that could be dotted along this kind of alignment, or any of the crashes that could occur with the roadside hazards. So side impact crashes with those, or just driving head on into those things. But also, yeah, head on with other oncoming vehicles. Those speeds are just not really survivable for our human body. Very unlikely you're in the next 5, 10, 20 years, we're going to see significant investment upgrading the infrastructure for these. You might be able to put, some RRPMs. You might be able to put, a little bit of a shoulder in there if you've got some money, but it's super unlikely you're going to be able to get continuous safety barrier along the edge as well as along the median. It's too far reaching if they're low volume. So how do we treat this scenario? And what you should be recommending as a safe system assessor is it comes down to speed. If we're unable to influence infrastructure here, we need to be saying this is just not an appropriate speed for this kind of risk level that we're seeing here. I actually worked on a safe system assessment just recently, just closed it off last week. It was a rural or a semi-rural, just on the outskirts of the metropolitan area. It didn't look like this. It was like a winding rural road. But it was fully sealed, no sealed shoulders. It had a dividing line and things like that. And it was exactly that discussion of, we know that it's not feasible to be recommending, let's build out this carriageway. It was going through kind of like a foresty area, lots of trees and things like that, lots of cuttings, and very, very scenic, very beautiful. It's really not feasible for us to be recommending, let's build out this cross section. Let's do fully sealed 3-meter shoulders. We want the barriers in. It's just not going to happen. It's not living within that pragmatic space. So instead, we provided solutions at specific areas along the alignment where curves were particularly tight, and how we can maybe maximize the carriageway space there. We looked at specific embankments that block sight lines and what we could potentially do there to improve that scenario, but also just made the recommendation that this should not be 100 kilometers per hour. Like it's not at all appropriate to have that being recommended as a safe speed to travel. Marissa.
Max, is there any value here in having some pull-off areas for rest stops?
Great question. So we'll give a prize out there. Certainly rest stops are quite common on our major movement corridors. So high volume rural roads, we might see rest stops. I tend to think that the lower volume rural roads would be unlikely to see that funding once again to have rest stops or rest areas, even informal ones, just a little bit of gravel on the side of the road to facilitate, taking a power nap or whatever it is. But yes, there is safety benefit in recommending that. The feasibility of it is another question. All right. So yeah, to the other extreme there, high volume rural roads, you've likely got a bit more money to be able to play with. That's where you'd be going for your barrier systems at the edge, both sides. You can get it down the middle as well to reduce the risk of head-on. Absolutely, go for it. Not all jurisdictions are up to, I suppose, that level of infrastructure, but yeah, there's certainly lots and lots of examples of that across the country, and encourage you to investigate that as an option. Certainly for your higher volume rural roads. These are the areas where it's actually really challenging to influence the speed. It's just incredibly political. People have a very hard time of seeing that, high speeds on these major roads can't be done safely. Well, if all the infrastructure is there, then it can be done safely. But, until we've got that there, it's really hard to be able to say that we should be dropping speeds on these types of roads just because of the backlash from the community and from politicians, I suppose, that may have the final say on these types of things. Where we have high and low volume rural road intersections, you can look to kind of maintain speeds perhaps on the high volume area. For the low volume road, you certainly want to reduce the risk of that see-through effect, which we can see we've achieved here. We've got these staggered key type of intersection being created. To further enhance the safety here, you could also put raised pavements, raised safety platforms on approach to that intersection, just so motorists are aware that they're approaching the intersection and not likely to head straight on through. There's also electronic signs, side road activated speed signs and things like that can be implemented. So let's just say I've got an electronic sign that's being installed there. Yep. That's not my best drawing. And on the local or minor rural road, I could have a loop or a radar detection. So this is the radar and it's looking that way. It notes, yep, there's a car there. This electronic sign could then actually drop the speed to say there's a risk there. The risk is you've got someone coming on the intersecting road. I'm going to drop the speed down from 100 to 80 or 100 to 70, whatever you're able to achieve, so that, hopefully bring down the likelihood of a collision occurring at that intersection. So having a think about, what kind of innovative infrastructure exists out there and how that could potentially be applied to your projects. High volume outer arterial. One thing that definitely catches my eye in these environments is having on-road bicycle lanes. It's just, so this would be, 80 kilometers per hour, and having vehicles crossing over to access the bicycle. Yeah, it's very, it's not an appropriate location for those on-road facilities. So perhaps as a recommendation, you'd be saying investigating shared path connections that are off-road, so we don't have cyclists that are potentially interacting with vehicles traveling at those incredibly high speeds. At those collision speeds, it's not survivable at all. So just that split-second distraction from a vehicle, they happen to be running out of their lane. There's a bicycle rider there. That's basically guaranteed to be a fatality. So strongly suggest you you look out for those types of facilities that may exist on projects that you're assessing. Something else that I suppose might form part of your assessment is the idea of pedestrian fencing. I'm sure Ken may have brought this up as well. I understand that the purpose of it, you don't really want to be encouraging pedestrians to cross over mid-block. You want them to use the signals, but if we have a look, we can see there's a bus stop over there. There's a bus stop on the other side. We know that there's going to be crossing activity there. It's naive to think that they're just going to be, using the signalized spots just because it's safer. If it's 100 meters out of their way, 200 meters out of the way, it's just not going to happen. So if you set up those fences, you're kind of penning pedestrians in, and they'll jump over it, or they're forced to kind of walk along it and then just end up for a longer time on the carriageway. Marisa.
Okay, we have a couple of questions. One was from, so widen centre lines and ATLM worthwhile in this area, and that was in referring to, I think it was this one.
Yeah, I think it would have been that one. Yeah, so widen up the centre line there. Audio tactile line marking on the edge line. You can also put it on this side here as well. That's big ticks. I like that. Good thinking. A surprise.
Good stuff. Okay, we've just had a recent one from Lachlan. With our current funding profiles not suited to proactive safety improvement projects, the common treatment would be likely be suggestion of speed reductions. Have you had any feedback from industry regarding efficiency issues, loss of productivity?
Right. So it's a valid point. And I do think that if we're going back to our movement and place thinking, and we're thinking about our primary movement corridors, I should say I like to be quite pragmatic. So I'm not always, just go by what the safe system definition is. I try to think of things a bit more holistically. So thinking about the movement and place framework, if we're in a movement corridor and we're acknowledging that this is, a state significance corridor for the movement of goods and people, which is likely, what the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator is also most concerned about. Those corridors, I genuinely believe we should be investing in infrastructure so that we can maintain those high speeds, so that we're not dropping speeds on those roads, because, as you say, it will create productivity issues. If you're driving from Melbourne to Noosa, and that's your route that you have to take as part of your trucking venture, if you're dropping from 110 to 80 across there, that entire length, that is going to add a lot of time to your journey. So instead, I really do think it's important to be pumping the money into those corridors, because there's very good strategic reasons to do it. It will improve the safety with all those, continuous barrier systems, changes to the configurations, ensuring that it's all interchanges and things like that. But the lower volume roads, different scenario. We're not going to get money there. The national, all your trucks and stuff, they may need to access the roads, but it is not as critical for their efficiencies and things like that. So we've got more levers to pull to say we should be doing changes to speed there.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question regarding the colour of the road, the lines on the roads. We've ventured from white lines. We've ventured to white lines instead of the yellow lines. If you look at high volume roads, the class of white on white with sun glare would be less than ideal and a safety issue.
Great. I personally haven't seen any evidence within that space to suggest the coloring to be, for or against a particular color. I know within Victoria, we would use yellow for temporary traffic management, like long major projects. They would actually implement yellow to show that this is like a temporary arrangement. We also use yellow in alpine areas where we've got snow, and the white can obviously get covered in the snow. But as to more globally, whether we should be adopting a yellow line or a white, I guess the US would be a perfect kind of a check against whether there is a significant difference in how legible it is for most users.
Yeah. And Michael's just asking, can you talk about the operation and overtaking opportunities on rural roads, given the thinking of wide centre lines and central barriers as safe system approach? Isn't there some quick wins with alignment to safe systems in urban and rural areas, dropping the common speeds from 80 to 70 or 60 to 50?
Cool. Okay, I'll go with the first part of the question. So yeah, overtaking opportunities. Completely agree. If you've got the scenario like this, Michael, where we've got a central median barrier, and then we've got no overtaking opportunities, and you're stuck behind a caravan for miles and miles and miles, that will be frustrating. And you would get, motorists being very annoyed that they're in that situation. So what is actually encouraged in these types of environments, it's referred to as the 2+1 type of arrangement, which basically means it's going to be hard to draw, but it's going to be like 2 lanes of traffic this way, and then the median barrier, and 1 lane there. So the 2 lanes of traffic, you're able to get the overtaking lane there. And then once, say that's been active for 2 kilometers, 5 kilometers, whatever, you've given that overtaking opportunity, you then flip that. So then there'll be 2 lanes on the other side and 1 lane on this side. And yes, that's going to mean additional cross section, but that is how you mitigate the risk of that driver frustration of just being kind of tunneled in to barrier and a barrier and then nowhere else to go. It's this kind of 2+1 configuration. The second one, sorry, I nearly forgot.
No, sorry, that's okay. And yeah, no, I wasn't aware at first glance that they were 2 separate questions, but yes, second question.
That's right. Quick wins in alignment to safe system in the urban and rural speed. Yes. From 80 to 70, 60 to 50. Yes, 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 and yes, there is absolutely quick wins to be made there. If we had tomorrow legislated that the urban default is 40 kilometers per hour, what we would see in our road trauma statistics across Australia would be going like this, and then legislation that. Like we would see a step change. That is absolutely accurate to say if we had a blanket approach to say that we don't accept this speed as appropriate, or the rural default for that matter. Yeah, it's the same argument there. Marissa, have you been involved in this module with Ken from the start? Because I'm going to tell a story, but I don't know if this group already knows it.
I have. I'll let you know.
Let me know, or anyone in the chat, if this sounds familiar. Just I'll stop talking. So the way that the rural default is applied in Sweden. So at the moment, we have the rural default at 100 kilometers per hour, right? And if you've got some pretty good environments, it's pretty safe there, you can go 110, right? Sweden, they say, no, we know that 70 kilometers per hour is the fastest that we can travel, and if there's a head-on collision, that's kind of the threshold. So we're going to take that as our benchmark. If you can upgrade that facility, then maybe you can get to 80. If you can upgrade it further and transform it, you can get to 90. If you can upgrade it further and you got dual carriageway, center median, you've got to 100 kilometers per hour. So they've set their threshold much lower to recognize that, you know, we are vulnerable, and this 100 target that we've set is basically a historic, you know, figure that was accepted, but it wasn't really referencing our own vulnerabilities as people. So that's kind of how they manage it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, well, thanks for that one. We don't have any other questions at the moment, so yeah, thanks.
We'll carry on. Spoke about that one. Major freeways in urban areas. This one looks like things I'd be looking at here. So first thing I'll note is if I was doing a site inspection here, there's no way I would be on the ground unless there's temporary traffic management set up. I'm not putting my boots in this area at all. Even if there's a shoulder for me to park on, and I can put the lights on the vehicle and stuff like that, but just personal safety, I'm not stepping out in that environment. So instead, it's likely you'd be getting dash cam footage and just driving through in that respect. Things that I suppose could be looked at in these scenarios is whether the barrier system is still up to spec. It's likely that it's installed decades ago, and whether or not we think that that type of barrier system would be able to perform with, you know, the kind of fleet that we've got on our network now. So we've got much heavier vehicles, much larger vehicles. Would that concrete barrier be able to protect errant vehicles from accessing the opposing lanes? Also, the addition of like the light columns there, it's not impossible to imagine, you know, a heavy vehicle that runs into the barrier and then actually hits the light column. How is that mechanism going to play out? Is the light column then going to fall onto the carriageway, the opposing carriageway, and block off all of that traffic and potentially have other implications? So not just that one crash that's occurred on this side of the carriageway, but kind of really interrupting traffic on both sides. What's more common to see with our major freeways where we've got these lighting columns is actually to build out the concrete area around the lighting column to negate that risk in particular. So you might have seen that it's just like a thicker bit of concrete there. So a heavy vehicle isn't going to strike the lighting column. There's just additional working width available there. Pretty unlikely you're going to be able to achieve that though in this scenario, just given what you're looking at here. Yeah, but just a few things that I suppose catch my eyes with this type of scenario. Major rural highways. So this is the way that I suppose we used to develop our cross section for our rural highways. It's quite a large center median. We wouldn't really do that now. We would actually make this much narrower and instead just put a flexible median barrier treatment in the middle. It's good because now it's not going to be as expensive. You can imagine if you got this kind of cross section that you need to maintain the whole way through hundreds and hundreds of kilometers or whatever it is. It's a lot of earthworks. It is a lot of carting material onto site, a lot of pavement and things like that. Also a lot of ongoing maintenance, whereas if you're narrowing the cross-section and you're instead reducing the risk of head-ons through a barrier system, as opposed to just being like, 20 meters gap in between the lanes should do it. It can actually be cheaper to go with that kind of approach. All right, this is my last slide. Rural intersections. I spoke about this one before, but that idea of electronic signs is probably a very good recommendation to make here. Even considerations of whether the rural intersection could be simplified. Maybe it doesn't actually need to be left and right out of there. Perhaps it's left in, left out. That would reduce the risk of obviously a right turn type of intersection crash. So that could actually potentially reduce exposure. You got to be careful though, making those suggestions, because if you are only analyzing this particular intersection, you might then be pushing the problem elsewhere. Like if a vehicle before wanted to turn right and you've just blocked it off, where are they going to go now to do that? Where are they going to turn left and do a U-turn? Is it at some random property access that happens to be nearby? And what are the implications of that? What are the sight lines there like? And things like that. So be wary of suggesting that unless you can identify exactly how those safe movements could be continued. Marissa, how are you?
Great.
It's good. Did you want to run through the LMS?
I can absolutely do that. I'm just setting up my screen.
Thanks, pal. We didn't have any polls or anything today? Did I miss anything?
No, we didn't. I did check that. So we're all good. We are running well on schedule. All right, I am going to share my screen now. All right, how's that coming through? We're all good. You can see the LMS. Okay. Yep. Well, firstly, I hope you're all tracking along well with your Module 4 assignment. Quite a few have already been contacted from quite a few of you regarding your sites. If anyone does have any issues with their sites, please let us know. We're happy to change that and get something a little bit more convenient for you. So not a problem. If you do have any questions regarding the assignment, please pop them into the chat. It's a perfect opportunity now to get a bit of assistance from Max to answer any of your questions if you have any. Otherwise, the due date for that one is next week. So we do have another week for you to get that one through. Okay, Module 5 from today. Your presentation from today is up on the LMS. And we have an IRAP comparison report here that you are welcome to open and browse. Just another quiz for today, another Module 5 quiz. Just click into that one, attempt the quiz, go through your multiple questions. Easy as that. I hope you're counting your Wallies today because there will be a Wally question in there. So hopefully you kept count. And that's all you'll have to do for Module 5 today. So just another quiz, and we'll have to give you a bit of time at the end of the session because we'll wrap up soon. So you'll have some time to get that one done. As for the completion of the course, so once you have submitted your assignments, so we will need you to complete your quizzes for each module and the 2 assignments that you, Module 2 assignment and your Module 4 assignment. So once you have completed and uploaded them, we'll give you some feedback and we'll score your submissions. And as you know, as we've mentioned, you will need to score 80% or higher on each of the tasks. So once they're all completed and you've passed all of the tasks, we've got a little section down here, feedback and certificates. We have a little course feedback form. It is anonymous, just a short little questionnaire, but we do require you to complete that. Just answer a couple of questions for us. Let us know how we've done. And once you have completed that form, along with all of the course tasks, your certificate will become available for you to download. So that will this is an inactive link at the moment because I haven't done my feedback. But once I have done the feedback and if I've completed all the courses and passed them successfully, this will be a live link and you can click on that and download your certificate, and easy as that. We've got a little share your achievement online. We've developed a series of badges in case you would like to share your new achievement with your online network, maybe your Facebook or your LinkedIn network. We've got a little link if you'd like to just follow this link. and just select the course that you completed. So we've got Safe System Assessment. This will take you to a couple badges here. You can pick any one of these pictures that you like, and you're welcome. We've made it easy for you to share that to social media. So we've made it, you just click on the link, whether it's LinkedIn, that'll take you to your LinkedIn profile and you'll be able to post that. We've also got some words here. If you'd like to pop in some words, you're welcome to use ours. You're welcome to write your own. Please tag us so we know that you've posted. We can share that as well. So there's just a little thing for you to share there with your online network if you'd like to. Apart from that, that's all you really need to complete for the course. Yeah, I don't think I've missed anything. Have there been any questions pop in?
No, it seems to be all under control. So thank you, Marissa. That was excellent. Yeah, it's a good time now just to say thank you for everyone for coming along to this training. It's great that you've taken time out of your busy schedules to join us and yeah, have a really good discussion around safe system assessments. If you're unsure at any time about, you know, what this is all about, or you forget a certain aspect of it, by all means, you are welcome to keep in touch. We're happy to provide that feedback. We have allocated just the rest of today to yeah, for you to work on your coursework. But it's been wonderful to have you all on board, and I'd like to also thank Marissa for being such a wonderful moderator as always, and doing everything in the background that not everyone sees, but it's a lot of back and forth, and really appreciate all your efforts there. We do have Trevor who's raised his hand, and
yes. Trevor would like to ask a question regarding his site. So we'll get you unmuted, Trevor. Michael, I just want to let you know the module 4 recording. I did just check it. It seems to be working on my end. Have another go. And in case that's not working, we'll get that sorted out. I'm not sure if that's not an issue on your side or my side. Trevor, I'll just allow you to talk, Trevor, and you can probably unmute yourself. Go for it.
Can you hear me?
G'day, Trevor.
Okay, that's great. Would you be able to open the where all the sites are, please? Just open mine up. I've got a couple of questions to ask about. It's a very complex site. I'm not sure how to go about assessing it.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Okay. Trevor, which one's yours?
3/4 of the way down, Olympic Highway, Travers Street. That one.
This one?
There. The existing intersection is a roundabout where Morong Street comes in from the left there. That's just one roundabout. It's one intersection. But the proposed design is basically 2 separate intersections. Do I assess those separately, or do I combine them, try and assess them combined, or how do I go about doing that?
Yeah,
I think if I do it separately, it's not a legitimate comparison to the existing. So yeah, it
is a complex site, Trev. We thought we'd give you a tough one, see how you go. And
yeah, all by myself. Thanks for that.
That's good that you called us up and made sure that you've got all the facts there. What I'd recommend is, yes, to try and do a combined one, because as you say, you want to compare apples with apples. So you compare the existing configuration, which is one roundabout, with this configuration, which is a fairly messy looking staggered T type of thing going on there. So yeah, give it a go. Try and just combine this into one consolidated area. You will be talking about both intersections, but you'll just need to consolidate the scoring to take both of them into account.
With the exposure, you combine all the AADTs for all the different approach legs. Would the fact that Morong Street is being made left in, left out, would that affect the exposure with the AADT?
It is a very good question. I'll just double check. Marissa, are you able to scroll down? Because we usually include, yeah. So we have the traffic volumes there, Trevor. And
Yeah.
I would recommend to use them for both the existing case and the design scenario. So you are correct. The exposure score may actually change if this were to be implemented. But for the purpose of this exercise, we're just going to assume no changes. So we're going to say whatever your exposure scores were for the existing, it's going to say the same for the design.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
Just to make it, a bit simpler, basically. But I
Yep.
agree with principally what you're saying there.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll have a go and see how I go.
No worries. Well, reach out, Trev, if you want any more clarification, because that one is a doozy, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Thanks for that.
No worries.
Great. Well, thanks everyone.
Excellent.
Yeah, well, that brings us to the end of the session. Hope you've all enjoyed the course, and thank you, Max, for delivering a couple of the sessions for this course. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, please email us. But otherwise, hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
That's it. Take care. Stay safe. Enjoy your day.
Yep.
Blue.
Bye.
Bye.